Hello and welcome to another episode of RECAPEthiopia, your number one source for a summary of events in Ethiopia over any given week. In this week's episode of the show, the preliminary report by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission on the ethnically motivated crimes carried out against the residents of the Mai Kadra city in the Tigray region will be covered. In addition to this, updates on the conflict in Tigray, the new draft directive regarding election campaign, the success and recognition of 2 Ethiopians in different professions, and the threat of a cholera outbreak in the southern nations, nationalities, and peoples region of Ethiopia will be discussed. Stay tuned and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to get more of RECAPEthiopia and other shows coming on Addis Zeibe. I'm Wangel Kamene, and this is RECAPEthiopia. Naturally, the first story in this week's episode of RECAPEthiopia is related to the situation update with regards to the conflict in the Tigray region of the country. This week, the conflict continued between the Ethiopian military, the Amhara militia and special forces on one side, and the Tigray special forces and militia on the other. The federal government allegedly recorded immense victories over TPLF forces, reaching the outskirts of the capital of the Tigray region, Mekelle. On Sunday, November 22, 2020, the Ethiopian Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed said via his Twitter page that the second phase of the military operation in the Tigray region had been successfully completed. He also extended a 3-day period for the TPLF to surrender before the final and third offensive on the capital of the Tigray region resumed. The deadline for the above invitation for the TPLF to surrender ended on Wednesday, November 25, 2020, at which point the Prime Minister announced that the third and final offensive on the capital had commenced, promising a swift end to the conflict in the region. However, calls have been made to the residents of Mekelle, who remained cut off from the rest of the world, to avoid public spaces and save themselves from airstrikes and raids that are going to be made on the capital of Tigray. The leadership of the once dominant political party within the EPRDF coalition that led the country with an iron fist for over 3 decades, however, came out saying that even if Mekelle falls to the hands of the federal government, the TPLF will continue to struggle. The spokesperson of the Tigray Command and the advisor to the president of the TPLF, Cholera, called the plans of the Prime Minister poorly constructed in an interview with Tigray TV on Tuesday, November 24, 2020. He said that the invitation extended to the TPLF was made as a result of the Ethiopian National Defense Force's inability to reach Mekelle by Monday, November 23, 2020, which prompted the Prime Minister to buy more time. The spokesperson said that no similar official statement from a head of state saying that his forces will bombard a city unless a select group of people are not handed over has been made before, calling the Prime Minister and the President, Isaias, egomaniacs in the interview. Getachew also said that conflict is going to be a people's war, stating that people everywhere will be fighting what he called the invader and aggressor throughout the region. The conflict has been escalating since it first broke out on November 4, 2020, roughly 3 weeks ago. Most of the attention of Ethiopians and the international community is still focused on the conflict currently underway between the Ethiopian National Defense Force, as well as its allies, and the TPLF-led Tigray Special Forces and militia. However, the deadline for the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia to hold the 6th national and regional elections of Ethiopia sometime between May and June is fast approaching. According to the decision of the House of People's Parliament following the recommendations of the Ministry of Health back in September, the Electoral Board is expected to hold elections before the end of the Ethiopian calendar year. Recently, it was announced that elections will be held either in the last 2 weeks of May or the first 2 weeks of June, depending on how preparatory tasks are carried out in the coming months. As the elections approached, it was announced this week that, contrary to previous practices, paid campaigns on different platforms would be allowed in Ethiopia's 6 national elections since its formation as a federation 3 decades ago. According to the new draft directive tabled by the National Electoral Board of Ethiopia and the Ethiopian Broadcast Authority, a provision allowing for paid ads or political campaigns in the course of the election has been drafted. The new directive is intended to govern the use of media as well as the allocation of airtime to political candidates, providing provisions that are intended to guarantee their rights to be elected while making sure campaigns adhere to the electoral proclamation and other legislations in the Ethiopian legal structure. The draft directive also requires media houses to create an electoral desk to cover the upcoming elections which had previously been postponed due to the pandemic in June 2020. The draft stipulates that 25% of electoral broadcast airtime and newspaper pages will be equally distributed among all candidates, while 40% will be distributed based on the number of candidate parties present in the parliament and regional council seats. 20% is reserved for women, while disabled candidates will be given 10% of the airtime. The remaining 5% will be shared based on the number of seats in the parliament currently. Elections in Ethiopia have been a point of constitutional contention since the decision by the parliament to postpone the August 2020 elections due to the onset of the pandemic in the country on March 14, 2020. The southern nations, nationalities, and people regions of Ethiopia reported this week that an outbreak of the cholera disease in the Dauro zone of the region has claimed the lives of at least 6 persons, as well as infecting 104 victims, of which 24 are under intensive care at the time of the shooting of this episode. The executive director of the region's public health institute told Addis Ababa this week that outbreak occurred in the Tercha area of the Dauro zone, also stating that it is imperative that the outbreak be controlled before it spreads to other parts of the region as well as the country. The source of the outbreak was identified as the shortage of water, which prompted the local population to consume the running water in the zone. According to the coordinator of response against cholera of the Dauro zone, Siyum Kapede, repeated warnings of the shortage of water in the zone had been made to different government structures, including the office of the Prime Minister, with minimal support rendered to the issue. The coordinator also told Addis Ababa that the impact of the outbreak has been mediated by the repatriation of the internally displaced population in the zone prior to the outbreak of the disease. According to World Health Organization, researchers estimate that between 1.3 and 4 million people are infected by the disease globally, with 21,000 to 143,000 people losing their lives each year to the communicable disease. Cholera is a disease caused by ingestion of food or water contaminated by the bacteria known as Vibrio cholera and continues to be a public health concern globally. The WHO describes the disease as an indicator of inequity and lack of social development, as well as suggesting access to clean water and sanitation and safe oral cholera vaccines as important determinants of the impact of the cholera disease. According to the Health Organization, there have been 6 different outbreaks since the 19th century. The current and 7th outbreak started in 1961 in Southeast Asia before spreading to Africa in 1971 and the Americas in the 1991. The current outbreak is endemic in many countries. This week saw the recognition of an Ethiopian female footballer, as well as the appointment of an Ethiopian human rights expert to a UN human rights body for a second term. Loza Aberra, who is an Ethiopian footballer and who recently signed to the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia's Women's Football Club on a 1-year deal, was included in BBC's 100 Women for 2020 list. According to the British Broadcasting Corporation, the award was given to those who are leading change and making a difference during these turbulent times. Loza Aberra is an Ethiopian footballer who has enjoyed immense success in Ethiopian women's football since joining her first club, Hawaza FC, in 2012. Her most decorated period as a footballer was with the Debit Football Club's women's team, where she won 4 titles and finished top scorer of the league between 2014 and 2018. Loza has also played for Adama City's Women's Football Club, helping it to its first league title after joining the club midway through the 2018 and 19 Ethiopian Women's Football League competition. She holds the record for the top scorer in the Ethiopian Women's League, scoring 200 goals in 6 seasons. BBC named 99 women in its list, as well as leaving one spot to all women that have been contributed to the betterment of the world in 2020. Concurrently, this week, Dr. Biniam Dawit Mazmur was appointed to the United Nations Committee on the Rights of the Child on Tuesday, November 25, 2020. Dr. Biniam's appointment as a member to the UN right body for yet another term increases his already strong contribution to the rights of the child at regional and international levels. He has served the committee as a member chairperson and vice chairperson in the past, as well as serving as the chair of the African Committee on the Rights and Welfare of the Child for 2 terms between 2012 and 2014 and 2015 to 2017. He also served as the Special Rapporteur on Children and Armed Conflict in Africa, according to the UN Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights. Dr. Biniam has also consulted with different governments at different times regarding child rights and adoption of policies and legal decisions conducive to child rights at different times. Dr. Biniam is one of the foremost continental experts on the rights of the child, publishing several academic works including Madonna, Mercy, Malawi, and International Children's Rights in Law Adoption, Children's at Both Ends of the Gun, Child Soldiers in Africa, and Listen to Us, Arguing for Child Participation in NEPAD. The doctor received his LLB degree from Addis Ababa University, as well as receiving his Master's in Law in Human Rights and Democratization and Doctorate in Law from the Universities of Pretoria and West Cape, respectively. He has also completed several other short-term and long-term courses in institutions such as the Central European University in Hungary and Abo Academy in Finland. The 40-year-old Ethiopian professor was born on May 22, 1980 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. This week, the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission released a statement on the killing of what it referred to as ethnic Amhara and Wolqait Ethiopians in the town of Mai-Khadra in the Tigray region near the Ethio-Sudanese border. Amid the armed conflict between the Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the TPLF-led Special Forces and militia of Tigray in the region, on November 9, mass murders of non-combatant civilians in the town was carried out by a group loyal to the TPLF known as the Samri. The Commission of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, Dr. Daniel Bekele, described the acts carried out in the town as an atrocious crime of massacre against civilians. While the Commission has promised to release a full report on the incidents, it has said that the actions of the extremist group Samri, aided by government officials in the zone, constitutes serious crimes against humanity and war. According to the international law, these are serious encroachments of rights forming fundamental portions of international human rights law and customary international law. The number of victims currently stands at close to 600, according to the preliminary report by the Commission, which was issued following its visit to areas of concern, including Mai-Khadra, Abrahajira, Sanja, Humera, Dansha, and Gondar cities since the onset of the conflict. According to its preliminary report, released following the Commission's fact-finding mission to the above areas between November 14 and 16, the attacks were carried out by existing city administration members of the town and the extremist group Samri in a premeditated manner following the heavy defeat suffered by TPLF forces in the areas surrounding the town. The attackers went door to door to identify close to 600 ethnic Amhara and Wolqait residents of the town by using ropes, axes, knives, and other sharp objects. According to the Commission, even though the attack was carried out by an ethnically motivated group, Tigrayan civilians living in the city provided refuge to countless victims in their homes, churches, and other shelters during the attack. In this regard, Commissioner Daniel Bekele said, "The unimaginably atrocious crime committed against civilians for no reason other than their ethnicity is heartbreaking. Yet we are consoled by the stories of Ethiopians who saw beyond ethnic origin to come to the aid of these compatriots in their time of need. These stories keep the hope of a return to peaceful coexistence going." Even though the Commission has repeatedly highlighted the severity of the human rights violation in the Mai-Khadra town, Dr. Daniel has also noted in an interview with ISAT this week that despite signs pointing to crimes against humanity and war crimes being committed, no conclusion on the categorization of the crime has been given by the Commission yet. He said more evidence is necessary before taking the above decision. However, in the same interview, Dr. Daniel also said that the attacks were premeditated with door-to-door identification of people using identification cards to differentiate members of a particular ethnic group living in the town. The commissioner also said that because of the involvement of the security forces and Tigray special forces in the town, the crimes could well be considered as war crimes. This is further compounded by the fact that there is an impending conflict in the region, making conclusions of war crimes a reasonable possibility. To further compound the severity of the crime, the Amhara Mass Media Agency reported on November 25, 2020 that mass graves of 74 bodies of victims of the Mai-Khadra attacks were found in the rural areas around the town, known as Abinet and Central Moja. According to the media agency of the Amhara regional state, it has uncovered bodies of 56 individuals in one area, as well as locating the bodies of more victims in a water well located in the area after following the report by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the testimony of witnesses to what the agency is already calling a crime of genocide. This discovery seems to be in line with the position taken by the Commission with regards to the possibility of the number of victims passing the 600 mark as further investigations are conducted.